everyone, and welcome to South Florida HIMSS Lunch and Learn webinar. Today's topic will cover the strategies for leveraging AI. Can I first have a sound check and make sure everyone can hear me? Vanessa, can you confirm you can hear me, please?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Perfect, thanks. So before we get started, please note that this session will have a 15-minute question and answer segment at the end of the formal presentation. We have muted your phones and ask that you please utilize the chat feature on this webinar by typing your questions for Dr. Ellis. You can type your questions during the presentation and they will be addressed once the Q&A session starts. The chat feature is located at the top right corner of your screen. Just click the bubble icon. Also, please note that this chat feature is viewable to all participants. Let me introduce our speaker. Our speaker today is Dr. Todd Ellis. He has 18 years of experience in the payer and provider sectors. He brings knowledge of the industry to drive sustainable and value-added change. Dr. Ellis is certified in several managed care and clinical applications with strengths in EHR design and implementations, intelligent automation, large-scale IT system transformation, population health management, and Medicaid IT transformation. He is a thought leader in transformation and process automation and has led numerous initiatives at large IDNs and government agencies. He currently leads the Healthcare Government Solutions practice for EHR and process automation and specializes in the enterprise selection, design, and implementation during workflow, including workflow and robotics, RPAs, and cognitive technologies. In addition to his practice responsibilities, he is responsible for KPMG's HCS Innovation Transformation Solutions, including the development of methods, accelerators, and delivery platforms. Please help me welcome Dr. Todd Ellis. Todd, it's all yours. Todd?
Hello, this is Todd Ellis.
Great. It's all yours now, Dr. Ellis. Go ahead.
Okay, so you can hear me, correct?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We have an echo. Hello, this is Dr. Ellis. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks for the kind introduction. I'm really looking forward to this discussion today. One of the things that you're going to hear, common themes as I go through this slide deck is, the need for governance when it comes to intelligent automation, the need for knowing when to apply intelligent automation and when not to apply intelligent automation. But more importantly, that we've seen the success of intelligent automation, especially in the healthcare sector. I like to say that we're no longer in the proof of concept phases anymore. We're actually in the pilot phases, meaning that this is a proven technology, it works. And hopefully by the end of this discussion, I'll give you some insight, I'll give you some understanding on where you might want to start your program if you haven't done one already. But more importantly, how do you leverage this to be more successful and to apply a competitive edge for your particular organization. So let's go through the objectives today. Again, I just talked about it a little bit. I want to kind of educate you on what is AI. I know, when I turn on the television or when I'm watching any programs on TV, I feel like every other commercial is focused in on artificial intelligence or intelligent automation. That just proves the point that it's here, that it works. But then again, there's so much out there. There's so much noise with regards to AI. A lot of people just don't know where to start or even how to start a program. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on with regards to the market when it comes to AI. I'm going to talk about how do you want to start an enterprise-wide strategy and why that's important. You never want AI to reside just in one particular area, even though that could be important, but the scalability of AI is very important when you want to reach full potential and understand or maximize the value to your organization. Next, we'll talk about governance, the centers of excellence. That's so important. Just to go out there and start a pilot and do a simple robotic process automation that may reside in HR or even finance, that's great. But without that underlying foundation, that governance structure of ensuring that whatever we're doing from a intelligent automation perspective, how it's going to value or bring value to the organization, you're going to be, in my opinion, not realizing the full benefit unless you have that governance structure in place. I say that's the most critical thing on this in this presentation today. I'm also going to share with you a little bit about return on investment. We've conducted several intelligent automation projects throughout the nation. I'm just going to share with you a sample of some of the areas that kind of has the low-hanging fruit where most organizations will start their intelligent automation journey. And then I'll talk a little bit about what's next based on what we're seeing in the market, but also more importantly, what you need to be asking yourself as an organization or even as an individual about AI and the ways that I should be looking at this in the next 2 to 3 years. All right, what is AI? There's many different definitions of what AI is, artificial intelligence. The easiest way to really understand this is, I like to say that intelligent automation is kind of the umbrella. There's a lot of different things that fall under intelligent automation. So first and foremost, it's good to understand intelligent automation is a much broader kind of definition that includes, machine learning, cognitive, robotic process automation, many different things. It can even include telehealth. It just depends on how you want to use that term within your organization. But under intelligent automation, you have several different categories. We like to say that they could be a class 1, which is robotic process automation, class 2, machine learning, class 3, cognitive, etc. And I'm going to go into those a little bit more in detail. But again, what we're seeing right now is most organizations, especially healthcare, they're starting out in the robotic process automation, especially when you start looking at the back office functions and some front office functions where they're heavily manual, transactional type of activities where you can overlay some automation and have the actual bot, we like to call them bots or software, actually do that manual labor. That's one of the biggest benefits of RPA. Machine learning and cognitive computing. Now, when you think of cognitive, a lot of people think of IBM Watson, basically where you have a bot or a system or a platform simulating human thought processes. Now, we see a lot of that in the clinical setting with IBM. We see a lot of it on the payer side when it comes to case management, things of that nature. So I think we're going to see more and more of kind of the more cognitive, but that's really advanced. And to be very honest with you, that usually takes a lot of resources when it comes from just people to educate the actual platform. It takes a lot of knowledge to actually educate the system so it can think like a human, but also from a monetary perspective. The cognitive type of class 3 automations can be very expensive when it comes to actually implementing those. But the value and the end result of the ROI is much greater also. Then you have machine learning. Now, again, machine learning is class 2. But again, that's just the application of AI that allows the system to actually learn and improve from experience, okay, without being actually programmed. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail, but I think it's really good to kind of understand what's under that umbrella of intelligent automation. So the 3 types of intelligent automation, I just talked about that. Again, in healthcare, what we're seeing is a lot of class 1, robotic process automation. And to be very honest with you, robotic process automation, in my opinion, in healthcare, while a lot of organizations are still doing that, I would like to say that RPA is kind of a thing of the past, meaning that it's out there, it's proven, and people are seeing benefits from it. Not saying that people cannot still see benefit, or organizations can't still see benefit, because it's there. But we're seeing the shift now to more class 2 type of automations in combination with class 1, because these things kind of can build upon one another. Let me give you an example. So if I'm looking at a process and revenue cycle, okay, let's say I send a claim to a payer. The payer comes back and says, okay, I need more information. Before I pay this claim, I need the medical record. We had a use case where that was an area where the client wanted to focus. They had a lot of resources on the medical record request process. So we apply class 1 automation, which is robotic process automation. So when you got the request from the payer, we actually designed bots that will actually go out there, identify kind of the medical record or the patient that they were requesting the medical record for. The actual bot will actually go get the medical record out of the EHR platform. It will actually PDF whatever documents they were asking, or the entire medical record if that's what was needed. It would actually PDF that, put it in the email, and send it back to the payer. So we were actually able to automate that entire process, okay? And this particular client had 15 people doing that full time on a daily basis. So we were able to show them savings where they could take those 15 resources and allocate them somewhere else to do more value added things, while we let the automation handle that medical record request process 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's one great thing about automation. They can run 24/7, and that's a lot of the benefit too. Now, class 2, working with another client where their process, and you have to really understand your process. Whenever you apply automation to anything, and you're going to hear this from me over and over again today, you have to understand your processes. You're going to find out 3 things. When you start really looking at automation, you're going to find out 3 things. The first thing, you have a process that's a good candidate for automation, okay? That's what you want. Secondly, you're going to find out, I just have a bad process, and automation is not a good target for this process. We just need to fix the process. Thirdly, you're going to probably figure out, okay, if I'm looking at this process and I want to apply automation to it, it may not even need automation because of the platform. You may not be using your technology, whether that's the EHR, whether that's the revenue cycle platform. You may not be using the platform the way it's intended to be used, the modules, the functionality. So again, the key here is you don't want to throw automation at a process just to say you have automation in a process. You got to make sure you understand, is a process the correct process to actually apply automation to. Some of our clients, they use a combination of class 1 and class 2 automation. When you look at a process, how complex the process is. So again, you may use class 1, class 2, and in some cases, you may even have class 3 all in one single process. Again, it just depends on how complex it is. Some of the things I want you to look at, I think this is a very telling slide here. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but there is one particular stat that I'm actually seeing right now. This is reality. If you look at the very bottom to your right, where you see the Morgan Stanley statement here, but Morgan Stanley predicts that 50 to 60% of white-collar work is automatable, and this will have a 30% labor cost reduction. I've actually seen this at a client. We came in, we actually looked at over 100 processes. We actually went through 100 processes with them in HR, finance, and rev cycle. And like I said before, they wanted to apply the RPA, the Class 1 automation in these particular areas. We identified, coming out of a workshop where we helped them identify where you could apply automation, we identified over 100 opportunities that were validated by the client. And the point I want to make is this. We had left that organization after we completed our work. The Chief Human Resources Officer took it upon herself to go out there and scan her organization regarding manual tasks. She came back, and this had nothing to do with KPMG. She actually came back and said at all levels, at the highest levels in her organization down to the lowest levels, that 33% of what they do at all levels could be automated. She did that. She took that responsibility on herself to identify where automation could be applied. Now, keep in mind, 33% in a 13 hospital system, that can kind of add up to a pretty significant ROI. So the point I want to make is this. Automation works. Automation is here, but you have to know how to apply it. But then again, knowing that if you apply automation correctly and you have a 30% labor cost reduction, one key thing about a growing organization, you could take that 30% and apply that in areas of your organization that's seeing the growth. So it's just not about cutting FTEs. It's really about the reallocation of FTEs to do more strategic things within your organization. Next, again, this just kind of confirms what I just talked about. But again, I'm just going to focus in on one thing out of this slide, okay? Because again, things are happening fast. I think people are really understanding the benefit of automation. But one key thing I want to say here is this. If you look again to your right in the middle, the concern for integration. This is so key. I've seen organizations where they may go out and implement one or two automations, and they're saying that we are successful. But what I've seen is this: if you do this in a silo, those automations or those processes that you automated, they're going to stay within that respective area. If you don't grow this from an enterprise-wide perspective, I don't think you're going to yield the greatest benefit that you may be wanting. But one key behind all of that is, how do you integrate automation into the workplace? That goes back to change management. You have to really understand how automation is going to change the way you do business. Secondly, that goes back to your center of excellence. That is the foundation. If you don't have a governance structure or center of excellence in place with the right stakeholders sitting at the table, you're going to have integration problems. I've seen organizations where you may be doing automation in finance. You may be doing automation in supply chain. You may be doing it in compliance. You could even be doing it on the clinical side. But if you don't understand how the automation impacts all of those areas, because there are handoffs. If you don't understand the handoffs, it's going to make for confusion and potentially a failed automation program. So you really have to sit down and really think about your program, what you want out of it, and get the right people at the table and really understand, how is this going to be integrated in a way that's going to bring value and not confusion. And that's so important. I've seen organizations where they bring up an automation program. It doesn't go as planned. and the program is stalled. It doesn't get back off the ground. They felt like it was a failure when it really wasn't a failure. They just didn't take the time, in my opinion, to really have that governance structure in place, to really understand if the automation is being put in the right area, but more importantly, how that automation is tied to the goals and objectives of the organization. That's so key. All right, next slide here. If you look at some of the things that's going on in the market, we have 8 items here that we're actually seeing in the market right now when it comes to automation. And again, I'm speaking from a healthcare perspective. Couple of things here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one, but rapid shift from experimental to applied technology. Again, these things work. Some of the top vendors out there when it comes to automation, and this is again was done by independent group, but you have the Blue Prism, the Automation Anywhere, the UiPath, as well as various others who are making strong progress when it comes to automation in the healthcare industry, which is good. Another thing too, automation, analytics, and low-code platforms are converging. They are. There's a leading low-code provider out there in the industry right now that really focused in on business process management, BPM, and they just recently acquired a intelligent automation company to actually complement what they're doing. So I think you're going to continue to see platforms converging, but also more importantly, a lot of these players are going to have the total solution, so you don't have to go out there and buy different pieces and parts to make your automation program work. And the way I see that as a positive. Enterprise demand is growing. It is. At one of my clients, they actually realized a pretty significant ROI within the first 6 months of their program. They went from a 0 ROI to within 5 to 6 months realizing an $8 million return on investment only on 4 automation candidates. So the benefit here is once you realize that value, you got to scale it. That's where you're going to get the most benefit, is when you scale your automation. A couple of others that I really want to focus in on that I think is important: the need to control AI. That's so important. I was sitting with the CEO and president of the Georgia Medical Association. He represents 8,000 physicians in the state of Georgia. And our topic came about the ethics behind AI. There's so much out there right now. There's so much noise when it comes to AI. A lot of the physicians are just really, really concerned about the ethics around AI. When should you be using it? When should you not be using AI? So I think there's a lot of fears out there about what these organizations are doing with AI, but how are we going to control it? When is it right for an organization, and when is it not? And again, that goes back to the governance. But I know that's a hot topic, and we're going to hear more and more about that. And lastly, internal governance emerging as key area. Again, I already talked about that, but any organization, and you're seeing this, you have chief digital officers where this may fall under their area of responsibility. But I think more organizations are really understanding that you got to have that governance structure in place. That is a key area. And I think if you have that, you're going to see more success. And one more thing I want to talk about: rise of AI as a service. You have software as a service, but now we're seeing AI as a service, meaning that there are many organizations out there now that will actually come into your organization and run your AI program. They will say, let us come in, let us find where the opportunities are, and let us help you realize the value without the organization not taking on any risk. That risk is all on the AI as a service provider. So we're actually seeing that more and more in the industry, and I'm sure that's going to mature. All right, some of the things with regards to things that needs to be in place to actually leverage AI. I think I already talked about probably most of these, but again, I'll just highlight these. Enterprise-wide strategy. You know, you got to have that understanding from an enterprise of how you want to use AI to get the maximal benefit. Governance. The governance process and what I've seen, again, that's critical. But I've seen different models when it comes to governance. For an example, I've seen a lot of hybrid type of governance structures where, depending upon the area where you want to apply automation, that governance team or that center of excellence may change in personnel with regards to how you want to use AI. So I'm seeing a lot of hybrid type of governance structures, but the key here is that there is a governance structure in place, and that governance structure is responsible for the rollout of AI, what's going to happen, when is it going to happen, is it benefit to the organization, but more importantly, what is the value that the automation is bringing? That's the responsibility of that governance team. Cultural self-awareness to align skills and enhance adoption. One other thing that I've seen as a positive when it comes to automation, once you go into an organization and you see the value that automation can bring, it actually opens up a whole new area for employees to build their skill set. We actually have people holding up their hands saying, I want to be a part of this, because again, an automation program is not just something that's going to happen in a specific time in one place. If you do automation correctly, this will spread throughout your organization, and you will need skilled resources that can go out there and identify those opportunities to apply that automation, to maintain that automation, to monitor the ROI. So if done correctly, while one area may shrink when it comes to resources, you're going to have an area of growth, and that growth is those resources that's going to be needed to actually maintain your automation program. So that's a positive. Frontline and operational engagement of stakeholders, again, that's just, I like to call that simple block and tackle. You got to have the right people at the table at the right time. And that goes back to kind of that hybrid governance structure. Depending on how you want to lay out your program, your governance team should change a little bit. You're going to have some standing members there that's going to always be in your governance structure. But based upon where you're going to point your program, you know, you got to have the right stakeholders when you actually put that solution in place. Embedded technology within clinical and operational processes. I mentioned that a little earlier. You're going to have some processes where automation may take up or eliminate 60% of that process. It could eliminate 80% of a particular process, but you still may have to have that human intervention when they come in. You know, once the automation is done what it needed to do, there's going to be a handoff to a human to kind of validate or approve what the bot has done. So again, it's really about understanding the process where automation is going to be applied, when there's going to be a handoff, etc. The last thing you want to do is automate a process and not fully understand where those handoffs are, because if you do that, you're going to have a break in the process and you're going to have a backup in your system. Data analytics for descriptive and predictive analytics, that's important. You do any automation, especially when it comes to machine learning and cognitive, those type of automations are only successful depending upon how good your data is. So data is key. Data has always been key, but you want to make sure when you start getting into the class 2 and class 3 automations that your data is of quality, because remember what I said, when you go to a class 2 and class 3, these platforms are now trying to think like a human, okay? It's trying to understand a process and it's making decisions based upon data. So the more correct your data is, the better success you're going to have, especially from a machine learning and cognitive type of learning when it comes to automation. All right, I have about 15 more minutes, so I'm going to run a little bit faster here, but the benefits of applying AI, again, I talked about it a little bit. I'm just going to hit on a couple of areas. It reduces actual human error in compliance tasks because you're telling the automation exactly what to do and how to do it. We've actually seen a reduction of quality issues associated with manual data entry because, again, The humans are actually, oh, sorry. There's no human intervention when it comes to the actual task. Process improvement and efficiency. When you apply automation, one thing I like to say is a task that would take when you apply automation, bot probably 2 minutes to do what it may take a human 30 minutes to do. We've actually seen that. That's proven. And it runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there is cost reduction, okay? For an example, I talked a little bit earlier about a client who had 15 people allocated full time to going out there and retrieving medical records just to send them back to the payer. Well, guess what? We were able to take out those 15 people. They were allocated elsewhere, but there is significant cost reduction when it comes to labor costs. And if you look at that from an enterprise-wide perspective, the ROI could be very significant. Some of the potential areas, we've seen automation in care delivery, and I have some things listed out here where you can actually apply automation. Human resources, we have proven use cases in human resources, finance and accounting, patient access, revenue cycle, legal compliance, and supply chain. The point I want to make here is this. In any organization, you're going to have manual tasks. You're going to have areas where automation can be applied. The key is just understanding where and getting the mindset of understanding how automation can be applied. Once you understand that, you're going to find numerous opportunities to actually use automation in a way that's going to bring value to your organization. I can say that with 100% guarantee. It's about the mindset. It's about understanding how you apply automation and when you don't apply automation. But again, there is value in your organizations. And for those who have automation programs up and running, hopefully you agree with me. It's just about how you apply it, what's the value to the organization. And once you really understand that, there should be really no area within your organization where you can't talk about automation or the potential for automation. Okay, I'm going to talk about the Center of Excellence. I've talked about the importance of this. This is so key. This is really, really key. Governance requires a collective set of structures, capabilities, and processes. And I kind of have them outlined here in different areas. But again, when you start talking about governance, you can't ignore the technology. There has to be standards with regards to the automation platform that you're going to use. Will that platform actually support your infrastructure? Strategy and policy. What policies needs to be in place when it comes to automation? You don't want your organization to have 15 or 16 different pockets of automation where you don't even know what's going on. I've been in an environment where HR was doing automation, finance was doing automation, compliance was doing automation. They were actually using different automation platforms. And the left hand didn't really know what the right hand was doing. So you really want to understand, what is the policy? How are you going to set your boundaries with regards to automation in your organization? Education. You have to educate people on automation. You got to educate people on how to use the tools. Accountability. You got to hold people accountable. Once that automation is in place, you got to let that automation do what it needs to do without any human intervention. That's key too. AI procedures and controls. Again, we talked about this a little bit earlier. That's so important. That's the purpose of the AI governance structure. We want to be able to put those procedures and controls in place so you don't have any kind of rogue automation within your organization. Why an automation center of excellence? Again, that's block and tackle. You got to have it. Any large organization, you're going to have a governance structure. You just do. But you have to have this center of excellence, especially if you're going to scale it and you're going to grow your automation. Now, if you're just going to do automation in one particular area, okay, well, you don't need a center of excellence. If you're only going to focus in on compliance, okay, that doesn't really warrant, in my opinion, a full-blown center of excellence, because again, you're not going to get the value that you want. But if you're talking enterprise-wide, these are some of the areas where you will need a center of excellence to make sure that you get the full benefit of your program. A couple of areas here: develop opportunities and ability to scale. I keep saying that, scale, scale, scale. That's where you're going to get the benefit of an automation program. You want to prioritize what's important to the organization. If you do any automation and you can't point it back to a strategic objective of the organization, why are you doing the automation? That's so important. Enhanced sophistication and collaboration. One thing I like about this particular square here or item here, once you do automation and you really start to understand your handoffs, what you hand off to somebody else from an automation perspective, the collaboration is going to naturally occur. And that's good because, again, automation, in my opinion, if done correctly, especially when it comes to complex automations, your automations will interact with other departments. It will. So it's going to be important to have that collaboration. So that's important too. Mitigate overall business risk and issues. That's important, okay? Understand your risk, understand the issues, and when you apply automation to it, it kind of reduces the risk, especially from a compliance, because again, guys, the most important thing is you are telling these automations kind of what to do. You are programming these bots. You're telling it exactly what to do. So think about that from a compliance and audit perspective. You're building automations within your organization. And when you're talking about compliance and audit, that spans the entire organization. I don't care if you're clinical. I don't care if you're finance. You still have to do audits. You still have to make sure that things are being held to compliance standards. Once you build that automation and you tell it exactly what to do and exactly how to operate, it actually reduces your business risk. It really does, because the automation is looking exactly for what you're telling it to do. So those are some of the areas of the importance of a kind of a COE. This is a busy slide, but again, hopefully this deck will be shared with the participants. But you know, there are many capabilities needed to stand up a COE, especially when it comes to being successful. I can't ignore the technology. Before you start any COE program, you have to have the infrastructure in place, not only for a particular area, but you want to make sure you set your infrastructure up to support a full-blown automation program. You do not want to have a technology infrastructure that's going to support one or two automations. Then when you want to expand it, it's not going to have the capabilities to actually handle your most advanced automations. So when you start talking about automation, the CTO should be at the table from an infrastructure perspective. Of course, the CIO should be at the table, your chief digital officer, but you cannot ignore the importance of technology when it comes to your automation program. I talked about the business value, so I'm not going to harp on that any longer. People and processes, again, that's so important. You can't have automation in your organization without understanding the impact to the people, and I'm talking about basic change management. One of the first clients where I did automation work, they had no idea the impact from a change management perspective that automation would have within their organization. And they learned real quick, but again, you have to understand how automation is going to impact your people and your processes, because it will. And that's one of the things with the COE. When you start looking at automation candidates, you got to start thinking about, at that point in time, when you identify an area that you can automate, you have to start thinking about change management. What is this going to mean to this particular department when we go in and put in this automation? So you kind of want to stay ahead of the game and start thinking about that day one when you start talking about automation. And of course, security and compliance, that's key too. Let's talk about some ROI savings. And again, this is very high level. but this is one organization where we did some work, and these were the actual savings. These are hard numbers from a client. Okay, these are not KPMG numbers. These are the numbers that the client realized based on top 10 areas in finance, human resources, and revenue cycle. Now, keep in mind, this ROI was actually realized. The 8 million, I'm rounding up. The 8 million was realized within a period of 6 months with this particular client. And again, this was the top 10. If you recall earlier, we've identified over 100 automations in these 3 areas combined. But again, when you start talking about automations, even though you may have 100 automation candidates, there's only so much you can bite off at any given point in time. Another key aspect of this was once the organization saw the value, people start raising their hand in compliance and supply chain on the clinical side saying, wow, these are real savings. How do I get involved in this? So one result of a successful automation program will probably be a lot of people raising their hands saying, I want to go next. Help me understand where I can help the organization take out cost. I'm going to give you, I got about 5 minutes, so I'm going to give you a flavor of some of the areas where they actually found the savings. And again, this is finance. So we talked about the top 10 is finance. These are the areas where they actually applied automation. And a lot of these were the low-hanging fruit. Whenever you start an automation program, you want to start out in areas where you're going to get some success. That's low-hanging fruit where, and let me define low-hanging fruit from my perspective. You have a lot of people doing manual processes where you can apply automation that would yield a large ROI, and that's easy to implement. So what I mean by easy to implement, meaning that the automation can be up and running within a 2-month period. So these were kind of the low-hanging fruit. Now keep in mind, there's some very complex automations that they identified, but they're taking those on a little bit later down the road once their resources get skilled up in how to apply an automation and build automation. And I think that's the right approach. So these are the finance. Let me show you the human resource. So for human resources, these are the areas. These are the processes that they went after with regards to automation. Again, that low-hanging fruit. We want that early success. We want to impact the bottom line as quickly as possible. Next is rev cycle. And again, I'll just let you guys look at this. But again, it's the same messaging. We've identified over 100 out of 3 combined. But these are the top 10 that they wanted to go after based on, again, easy to implement. And it was very easy to realize the ROI for the organization. And the numbers are below. All right, what's next? These are the challenges. Within any organization, these are the things that you will have to address when it comes to an enterprise AI strategy. And we talked about all of this, but you're going to have a strategy and a way of addressing each one of these. Your strategy, your culture, your technology, your data analytics, who's going to be involved, your stakeholder engagement, and your governance. So you need to sit down and really understand as an organization, how are we going to address each one of these for our enterprise-wide AI strategy? I don't think you can ignore one of these and have a successful program. Scaling, intelligent automation. Again, it works. Intelligent automation works. I talked about proof of concept. Actually, proof of concept phase could be marked out here. I really do. I think organizations they understand that this works. They're going right into a pilot. They're saying, we know it works in a certain area. Let's go ahead and pilot 1 or 2. Let's show the value, and let's get an enterprise-wide solution in place. What comes with that is center of excellence, and then how do you leverage your COE to support the organization going forward? Some of the essential elements of an effective AI enterprise-wide strategy. Again, we talked about this. You got to have those wins. You got to be able to measure the success of your program. You got to have a roadmap. What's important to the organization? How are we going to prioritize what comes first, second, and third? That's key. We talked about change management, your adoption model, data analytics, including the right stakeholders. That's so important. And again, anything you do from an automation perspective, if it's not in alignment with the enterprise strategy, well, why are you doing it? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Why are you doing it? Some of the questions you need to think about, I'm going to pick two here. Do we have the right data? Is our data telling us all we need to know? All right. Where are we with our automation programs? Are we ready for it? Can we expand it? If we only have it in one area, are we getting the maximal benefit out of our automation program? You're probably not. But again, it goes back to the governance structure. The key is to start your program and expand and expand and expand where it makes sense. This is not a one-time in place type of program. It's a program that's going to grow and it's going to continue to grow. Now, keep in mind what I told you. Class 1, simple RPA. Class 2, machine learning. Class 3, cognitive. It's only going to get more advanced. 2 years from now, guess what? I guarantee you we'll be talking about more cognitive and machine learning type of automations than RPA. That's already happening now. So you want to set the groundwork and the foundation for your program now that's going to help support you when you're ready to move to the class 3s because you already have that structure in place. So you don't have to go out and buy the Cadillac right now. You can actually start out with a, no disrespect, you can start out with a Hyundai. That's my analogy. So just start the foundation. You don't have to go to the Cadillac or Ferrari day one, but start the program. And once you start that program, you're going to have the necessary building blocks in place to support you as you move to the more advanced automations. All right. So I know that was a lot, but I wanted to give 10 minutes for any Q&A that the group might have. And again, my contact information is here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. This is an exciting time for healthcare when it comes to automation. So I guess I'm going to open it up if there's any questions. I'm assuming you can still hear me.
Dr.
Yes.
Ellis, did you receive any questions? Go ahead.
Sorry?
Hi, this is Liz again. I'm wondering if you have received any questions through the chat, through the app.
I do not see anything here.
I noticed that quite a few people are not on the webinar, but they called in, so they were listening to what you were talking about. So I'm wondering if anybody has any questions that they would like to ask that are on the call. I have a question, Dr. Ellis. Can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
So you discussed, and I appreciate your presentation. Thank you very much. You discussed, the do's, right? What you must do to be successful. Can you describe a project that you were on that was going south, and maybe there was some change in the organization to follow your model to make it successful? And maybe describe a little bit about what that took. Do you have any examples where people were not following your best practice model and had to stop and rethink their process to adjust to make it successful?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So one example was this: one of the largest healthcare providers in the nation. They wanted to do, again, this is the proof of concept. I don't believe in proof of concept anymore because this is a proven technology. But they did a proof of concept. They did 2 automations. Uh, Once they did those automations, they echoed success. They yelled out, "We were successful." But one key thing that happened, and we talked to them about the Center of Excellence, but they just didn't want to go down that route. What happened, the organization realized the benefit within this one particular area, but they were unable to scale. They weren't able to scale because they did it in a silo. They didn't have that foundation in place to say, okay, how do we take this and how do we scale this enterprise wide? And what happened, they had to stop. I mean, once they had those 2 successes, it didn't go anywhere. So they had to kind of take 2 to 3 steps back. They had to create their governance structure. They had to bring the right people to the table. And what was interesting is that when they had the right people at the table, one of those 2 processes that they claimed success, they stopped it because they could not communicate how it pointed back to a strategic objective of the organization. So that one automation they just took out. I mean, they said it made no sense. They understood why they wanted to do the automation, but they could not point it back to a strategic objective. So they probably had to take 2 to 3 steps back, get the Center of Excellence in place. And once they did that, they just kind of vetted, going forward, when was it right to do automation and when it wasn't. And I think that probably saved them a lot of money. So I have another question here.
Great.
How do you balance client expectations when they expect higher model accuracy, but their own data shows limited predictive statistical value? That's an interesting question here. Hold on, let me think on this one. When their data shows limited predictive. Okay, so hopefully I'm going to answer this correctly. Hopefully I'm understanding the question as it's written. Client expectations, you always want to reach the highest client expectations you can when they expect higher model accuracy. But the data shows limited predictive statistical value. That's interesting because when I look at that question, it goes back to data, right? How good is your data? So if you're, especially when it comes to cognitive and machine learning type of automations, if you have a lot of faith in your data and your data is correct, you could point back to your correct data and your data is telling you that, okay, there is no, I'm not going to say value, but statistically speaking, there's not a change. Well, that goes back to what I said earlier. It's one of 3 things here. Either you just picked a bad process, maybe it's the process, maybe you're not using your systems correctly, your technology systems, right? Or maybe you just picked a bad process to automate. Maybe that just wasn't a good candidate for automation. Those are kind of the 3 things that's going to come out of it. But one thing about automation, once you put it in place, it's going to tell you really quick if there's a significant ROI and if you're getting the value that you thought you would get. So that's one thing I like about automation. Once you put it in place, you'll be able to tell fairly quickly if you're yielding the results that you thought. And if you're not, pull back the automation. Pull it back. You don't have to wait 2 to 3 years. Pull it back. So that's one thing I can appreciate about automation. You're going to see the value quickly, or you're not going to see the value quickly. But again, if you have a good Center of Excellence in place, you should be able to, before you even get to that point, really understand, is there going to be value? Is this going to be good for the organization or not?
Okay, great. Do you have any other questions that you've received?
Yep. If an organization is siloed, as many are, how do you align stakeholders and get everyone focused in the same direction? Okay, that's a tough one. every organization, in my opinion, they may have one or two silos. If you show me an organization that's not siloed, man, you're living in utopia right now. But I think the key is this. Once you show the value, and again, it's about the low-hanging fruit. It's really about the low-hanging fruit, where you're going to be able to show that this is successful and have a good ROI. Once you're able to communicate that throughout the organization, you're going to have people rallying around this, especially if they could see the value, even though they were not the first to do the automation. That tends to get people's attention when you say this works. It's actually allowing resources who are doing manual tasks to do more strategic things for my particular department. It works. Now, keep in mind, change management is so important. You're going to have some people that just don't want automation within their department. But I guarantee you, if the organization is seeing success at an enterprise-wide, it's going to soon become a strategic priority, probably that every organization take a look at themselves, or every department take a look at themselves and see how automation can be applied to help reduce costs.
Okay, great.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I think we have maybe, if you have one more, I think we have time for one more.
Okay. Here we go. And this is from, okay, thank you. In this engagement, the client had stronger faith in the ROI from their data, but the statistical analysis by the consultant showed it not useful for driving use of predictive. Okay, no, this person was just responding to the first question that he asked. But I do have time for one more.
Will you take questions by voice?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So I am wondering if, unquestionably, people who used to perform certain tasks manually, and those processes that are automated, they add incredible value in understanding those processes. To what extent is it good to have them involved in the AI process? They have incredible insights. Again, sometimes they're also a detriment to the process if the attitude is not right. Like, how do you work through those attitudes and normal processes of change?
No, you're right. I'm gonna give you an example. We were doing what we call an opportunity assessment workshop. That's where we sit down with departments and help them understand or help them identify what automation can be applied. And believe me, once you get in that workshop, you really start talking about the processes, because they know the processes. You got to have the people in the room who know the processes. Once you do these workshops, the light bulb comes on a little bit. They're saying, wow, you just basically automated my entire job. That's a reality. That's a reality of it. One thing you have to make sure that people understand is, yes, while it's automating your job, it may be automating 100%. It could be automating 50% of the job. But keep in mind one thing. Even though it may be automating your job, it in my opinion, it opens up doors too. Because again, even though they may not be doing their job fully, they can look elsewhere within the organization to do more strategic type of things. Now, keep in mind, we did have certain individuals that were very defensive and did not want to participate. And you should be expecting that. But again, as automation matures, as organizations do more machine learning, cognitive, they do more RPA, this is something that organizations are going to have a strategy to deal with. And again, that's the importance of the COE. Some people are going to get on board. They're going to embrace this. They're going to want to be a part of it. Some are just not. And that's just the reality of it. So again, it's more about having that change management discussion up front, helping understand based on different scenarios, how does the organization want to react when you have people who are resistant to change, when you have individuals who are impeding the advancement of automation? So you got to have strategies for all of that before you even start to do any automation.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And unfortunately, we are out of time. I appreciate, Dr. Ellis, your insight and your information. We also appreciate that we can touch base with you and that you provided your contact information. And if anybody else has any questions,